start thinking usually a couple of expansions ahead. So, I mean, this is something that we knew was coming since before Shadowlands came out, kind of laying the groundwork and thinking about places in Azeroth that we have yet to explore and stories that we wanted to tell. Dragons are something that's always been such like a compelling part of all aspects of World of Warcraft, whether it was Onyxia infiltrating, the human kingdom back in the very earliest days of WoW storytelling, to their role in Wrath of the Lich King and beyond. And so really excited to just dive really deep into the nature of dragons and their history and their role in Azeroth. There are 4 major zones, as well as a separate starting zone for the Dracthyr Evoker, which I'm sure we'll chat about in a little bit. And these 4 zones are not necessarily themed around the Dragonflights the way you might think of the Dragon Shrines and Wrath of the Lich King or whatever, but they certainly have powerful ties to the history of the individual flights. So players will begin their journey in the Waking Shores, which are waking in the sense of literally coming to life, and a place bursting with primal elemental energy and magma and tectonic activity. And it's no surprise that we're going to see both the red and the black Dragonflight, for example, very heavily represented here, with their close ties to the earth, fire, and that elemental energy. And as players continue to explore and traverse the Dragon Isles, this is also a space that is very vertical, which is fitting in a sense for a winged race of beings. But as you ascend, you'll be climbing through rolling plains into frozen tundra and eventually the peaks atop the Dragon Isles. And each zone has its own character, its own cultures and civilizations that have been living there for thousands of years. Not just dragons, but certainly in the shadow of dragons in their history. And all of those stories are going to intertwine as players explore this space.
Yeah, the Dragon Isles is a super varied landscape. At one time, this was all the domain of dragons, and they had struggles. They had enemies that they had to fight against and keep in line, but this was their kingdom. This was their homeland, again, where they laid their eggs, where they raised their young. And so to come back here after thousands and thousands of years have passed, because they had to leave it behind when the sundering of the world caused that elemental energy to kind of drain away from these lands. And now, with all that's happened and Azeroth taking that next step of revitalization, those energies are coming back. And that's what's causing this land to awaken. And that's having all kinds of ripple effects. As the dragons come back to reclaim their lands, other forces want to stake their claim to these very magical lands as well.
Our goal is to have, compared to Shadowlands certainly, much more freedom of exploration and less linearity within the individual zones. But as you level from 60 to 70, there is still this sense of the first, second, third, and fourth zone, at least on your initial playthrough when your first character. I think as we saw with Threads of Fate and Shadowlands, we want to make sure there's maximum flexibility when you're leveling alls. But I think there's one of the things we learned from the full branching sandbox structure of Legion and BFA, where you could do the zones in any order, is that it's more challenging, and in some cases impossible, to have a linear narrative arc when you can do the zones in any order. I think as players are going to discover, when they get there, their journey necessarily will take them to the summit of the Dragon Isles, to the Tower of Tyrhold that we saw in the cinematic where that beacon was lit. And being able to just start there as your first zone would kind of undercut some of that. But it's, we want an exciting journey guided by purpose, but with tons of freedom to explore, to, get to know the cultures that you're interacting with, to chase side quests, and to feel like, there's a story moving you forward, but you're not on rails the whole way.
Yeah, the Dragon Isles is a land that's alive with stories. And while there is that central thread that takes you through the land, you'll uncover all sorts of different groups, different reputations that you can work through, that as you build them up, more stories unlock that way. So it is meant to encourage exploration and for the player to choose which groups they're more interested in, and that rewards them by not only giving them more story quests, but also cool rewards that are tied to these different groups.
We probably started with the idea of a new race first. It's one of the things, as we're coming up with any expansion concept, we ask the question of is there a natural fit here in terms of a new player race that we can introduce? And there's something compelling about both, the fantasy of, literally being a dragon, that's something that, players love dragons, love everything about them, including their ability to take on a visage form and meld with, the rest of society. But we're learning about the perspective of the Dragon Isles from their side, as well as from the perspective of the rest of Azeroth and the humans and dwarves and elves who are coming to the shores for the first time. So I think once we really got excited about the idea of chasing a customizable full-player race that delivered the fantasy of being a dragon, being a descendant of the dragons in Azeroth, well, then the natural next question was like, well, what classes can they be or should they be? And increasingly and pretty rapidly, we realized that like none of our existing classes was exactly the right fit. The fantasy of being a dragon, they call down powers that are different than what mages or warriors or any of our known classes do. And of course, by their nature, they have these unique physical gifts, like literal wings and claws, the ability to unleash breath weapons. And so that got us really excited about building this integrated race/class that could only ever be Dracthyr as well. Try as they might, we want to make sure that all the different races of Azeroth can learn the range of skills and talents of the other classes. An elf is never going to be able to literally take flight and do a soaring deep breath over their enemies. Only Dracthyr can do that.
Yeah, as you explore the background of the Dracthyr and learn about their origins, you'll see how they are uniquely positioned to tap into the magic that was bestowed upon the aspects in the different Dragonflights. So their abilities are themed around those different Dragonflights and felt like something that should be unique to the Dracthyr, that it should be their legacy that they are claiming and finding their place in the world. So it just allowed us to tell some really cool stories about them tapping into these powers and exploring the Dragon Isles through their eyes as well.
In the years since we moved away from the standard talent trees that we had, back in Wrath and in the classic days to the Mists of Pandaria style system, we've realized that while, there was initial appeal to focusing the choices and, really meaningful pivots in your character's capabilities, that system didn't lend itself to the same sort of ongoing growth and expansion. And in the past, we might have just said, hey, it's a new expansion, you have 10 new talent points, 10 new levels, this is what your class is gaining. We were increasingly turning to new systems to kind of fill the hole that the change to the talent system left. Things like artifact weapons or Azerite or covenants and their soulbinds. And of course, some of these were more successful than others, and there was a lot of excitement in them. It also inherently feels pretty bad to leave something behind at the start of every new journey, to start every expansion by saying goodbye to a piece of your character that you've grown attached to over the last couple of years, as opposed to feeling like you're progressing, you're carrying this forward. And so we're really excited to overhaul our talent system, return to its roots in a sense, but also carry a lot of the lessons that we've learned over the last dozen years about different talent systems and how our players play the game today. Our goal here is maximum customization and flexibility, and really returning to some of the things that we lost, like being able to really be a hybrid. Say you're a paladin and you're a ret paladin. Are you ret holy or are you ret prot? That's something that had meaning a dozen years ago, but that you can't really express in today's system in Shadowlands. That's something we see as essential to the Dragonflight system going forward. But with that customization, we also recognize that players expect, and rightly so, the flexibility of being able to optimize and problem solve around specific settings, whether you're going into Mythic Plus, whether you're changing roles, whether you're going from an adds heavy raid encounter to a single target raid encounter, PvP, whatever else. And so we don't want to bring back any of these sort of old school classic increasing costs on respeccing or anything like that. Our current plan is for you to have multiple loadouts that you can change in town and customize there, but once you have loadouts set out in the field, you can just swap from your Mythic Plus loadout to your raid loadout, get summoned to the raid, and you're good to go. It's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing in that the Dragon Isles, we were conceiving of them as a very vertical space from the start, because that's really what suits the fantasy of the location. But I think dragon riding is a natural fit because it allows players to adapt their movement and their traversal to what the world asks of them. And from a level design perspective and from a content design perspective, as you level up and improve your dragon riding skills, you may be able to more easily reach locations that you couldn't before in terms of accessing new content. And in just how we lay things out, There's a lot more space in the Dragon Isles than in many of our recent expansion zones. A lot of negative space in a way that I think makes the world feel more alive and more real. It's a place that exists in which stories occur, as opposed to a place that was crafted to tell a specific story. But one of the reasons that's, one of the things in the past that's led us to more compact zones is just the convenience of travel and how players are going to get around. But when we know that, once you've gone out and reached the top of that cliff over there, you can just hop on your Drake companion and, dive bomb, gain a ton of momentum towards the ground, and glide your way back to turn in your quest. Suddenly it makes it much easier to actually deliver that, immersive world setting without feeling like the gameplay mechanics are fighting against it.
Our level designers were super excited to embrace the verticality of the Dragon Isles and make it this place that had these things you could see in the distance and figure out how to navigate to them. That sense of wonder as you see these vast horizons. That was something they really embraced, and were excited to make this land that felt very open, very vertical, lots of places to aspire to reaching, but also feeling like the dragons had, that you can see their wings spreading out over the vast plains and soaring through the sky, and to be up there with them is just a great thrill that our players will really appreciate.
Our profession overhaul for Dragon Isles crafting in particular, I think, is aiming to deliver something that, frankly, I think has always been a missed opportunity for World of Warcraft, and that's a real sense of depth and identity to our trade skills. There's no reason why being able to say, I'm a blacksmith, or I'm an alchemist, or I'm an herbalist, couldn't be every bit as much a part of your character's identity as the spec that you choose to play or the content that you choose to pursue. I think some of the closest that we came to that was actually probably 17 years ago, where, if you were a notorious enchanter on your server who had gone out and collected all of the recipes and you had the best enchanting rod, people could seek you out across your server because they knew that, yep, you're the one who can provide what everyone wants. Increasingly, that amount of differentiation has been lost when it comes to professions. So one of our goals in Dragon Isles crafting and gathering has really been to allow people who want to really go deep, to specialize, to master their art, to be able to make some of the most powerful items around, but also to be able to interact socially in a way that hasn't been the case in a while. We have a new system of work orders and collaborative crafting that can allow people to get maybe a bind-on pickup crafting material from running a dungeon or from doing something out in the world. They can then bring to a crafter and have the crafter turn into a piece of armor or something for them to wield. Or they can go to the new work order section that's kind of an addition to our auction house system, where they can list their work order and the materials that they are providing, what their commission they're going to pay is, and then crafters can come along and see, okay, there's this thing that I can do, I can make some gold, I can improve my blacksmithing skill, let me fill this work order. And so there's a lot of nuance, a lot of depth. Can't wait to see players' reactions to this over the course of our alpha and beta, but we're really trying something truly fresh when it comes to professions in Dragonflight. One of the other things we're really excited to bring in Dragonflight is a fresh look and an updating of our World of Warcraft user interface, starting with the HUD, the heads-up display that consists of the action bars, the unit frames, what you see on your screen as you're running around the world moment to moment. And there's two pieces to this. One is simply the aesthetic. In many ways, the aesthetic of the World of Warcraft UI is not something that has evolved meaningfully in the last 17 years. We want to do something that remains true to its origins, but also feels fresh and modern and crisp and supports higher resolution monitors and the way people play the game today. Speaking of higher resolution monitors, I think one of the other challenges with our UI, our default UI, is that it doesn't necessarily have information laid out in the best way possible for the larger screens that people are playing on today. I think the default of literally having, you have your own player frame in the upper left-hand corner, your buffs and debuffs in the upper right-hand corner, you're looking at your action bars at the bottom. That all worked physically when the UI was originally created, or the 1024 by 768 CRT monitors people were playing on back in the day. But now you get your cool widescreen, ultra widescreen monitor, you want to play all your games on it, all your other games instantly feel better. The default UI experience in WoW It's honestly not really the case today. And so one of the things we wanted to solve was information layout offering better, more centralized defaults, but also a much greater level of customization and flexibility to let players, without needing add-ons, move things around, place the information where it suits their playstyle and their aesthetic. World of Warcraft is a game designed from the ground up for the PC. I think, we've just been looking at the ways in which add-ons have at times felt increasingly required, where like the first thing you do when someone comes to the game for the first time is tell them, hey, go download this add-on pack and move this stuff around. And we want to do better for our players. And so really this is, we're not looking to replace add-ons. We know that people love that powerful customizable aspect of our game, and we're not going to take away your LVY or whatever else your add-on of choice is, but we want to make the out-of-the-box baseline experience just better and more accessible.
Well, one of the nice things as we're going into Dragonflight is that the Horde and the Alliance have had time to kind of reflect on recent events and to live in this period of truce between them. So unlike some of our previous expansions where the Horde and Alliance were contesting for ground, they're actually making a cooperative effort here in going to the Dragon Isles together. And one of the ways that they're differentiating some of the things they've done in the past is this is, at first and foremost, an exploration of this new land, and so it's fitting that they have their explorers come forth and lead the charge. So on the Alliance side, the Explorers League will be working with, on the Horde side, the Reliquary, and together they're forming something they call the Dragonscale Expedition. And these two groups will be navigating through these lands, setting up little outposts for us, helping us along our way as we're exploring these ancient lands. And that leads to some fun kind of rivalries where you have these two different groups that are both interested in relics and knowledge, but they've got to work together. This is the spirit of cooperation, but there can still be some of those little internal rivalries that are just fun storytelling. It's an exciting time for both of these groups. The Horde has a council now, no longer a single war chief that's guiding them into conflict, and we'll explore those stories and kind of see where the Horde is at, and also see how the Alliance is dealing with some of the changes that it has experienced in recent history.
We have nothing specific to announce there. I think I will say that we're not rapturously happy with personal loot and its complexities. It's a system that often can feel inscrutable to players and can cause some frustration where you can't understand why you can't trade something or when you can. We know there's room to improve there. And so I think some form of collaborative, cooperative loot allocation is not completely off the table, but there's nothing specific that we've settled on just yet. It's been really fun seeing the community reaction to the return of tier sets. And bring them back in a way that they're not just for raiders, but also accessible to players who do Mythic Plus, players who PvP, and it's something that we're definitely going to carry forward into Dragonflight and beyond, and just excited to see that evolve along with the rest of our systems. Overall, we're happy with how the Great Vault has played out. There's room for improvement and something that we're going to continue to iterate on the same way we recently improved the Consolation Prize, for example, in a recent update, if there isn't something you pick from your vault in a given week. But that weekly structure to complement Mythic Plus and PvP makes sense, and we feel that the Great Vault is a better version of that system than the standalone single-item chest that we had in Legion and Battle for Azeroth. We want to continue to iterate on that as we carry it forward.
One of the cool things about the Dragonflights is that the Bronze is back. We get to see their place of power in the Dragon Isles, and it's very much time-themed. There'll be some great adventures there, and yeah, as we know from past stories, the Bronze aren't the only ones who are interested in the time ways. There are infinite dragons out there as well, and so how these two groups interact, what their goals are, what they're trying to achieve, that's very much interwoven into the story of Dragonflight. It would be criminal for us to have a dragon-themed expansion coming to this homeland of ancient secrets, ancient discoveries, and not have Rathian, the smarmy, handsome, dashing, a little bit annoying sometimes, representative of black dragons coming with us and exploring these lands and getting his perspective on this, because he's young, he's never seen these lands before, so this is all new to him as well. And seeing Rathian's perspective on this is always fun, but especially here in the Dragon Isles, it's going to be a real treat to adventure alongside him and get his take on some of these events in the history that's unfolding.